Mansulang un total mergid rogui. Dido mulo de siasu sirgi del maibudul maraklay. Bilung ma abiraklay marugul silbelau marugul belau. Ang el alto tao yang soadel mo o ay sabe bira aurora ni amlam kutbok rakora roof center. El guk masada gelurol gire la tokora atel mele la Typhoon. Telmelel sel kamura Typhoon matama la karger yang mara tetelen ma ela ngari aurol diri gimil getmok sel aurura Typhoon surigi mang mil getmok lemla momrek sayid luror mang soma manung telte alle gukti me gor o aisa agel goram getmok gel sayid Typhoon ya era kuidia olguyung mora angal el gestrigi de mobolo sa de sei en sokal de aisa sei tial toera agora omes atel mele la Typhoon atara agora wal untara gerurol gora roof centera hablo el selbol mereka agora Typhoon malu ben storm en top del mo gora omes aseng lo agora atel mele tel Typhoon len cloud to trail do de tel mele Typhoon mel sebe del gora wa bodo mudu el malas lo hace al duba Typhoon en ra un role le del mutel gut makla garger mere del el mutel moluk el moises mele recovery madalo ay se bok udi olgung ma ngal gestri del Christina ma di gugerin la so Christina good morning after Typhoon surige what was done during that or after the Typhoon.
Morning. So yeah, usually if there's any kind of tropical storm or a typhoon, Pickrick will go and do a site visit. So in this case, the Typhoon Sergei hit from the west side of Palau. So we went to some random sites on the west coast to check if there was, visually check if there was damage. And what we found was we saw that there had been damage to the reef. So then we selected 8 sites. 7 were from our long-term coral reef monitoring program, and 1 was from our MPA, pan-MPA surveys. And then we went and surveyed those sites, so we took photos of the reef and then analyzed them and compared them to the coral cover and other things like turf cover, compared it to the data collected in the past. So from 2020 to 2021, was there a change in coral cover and turf algae also?
Okay. When you say after the typhoon again through the west coast, and you mentioned that you randomly select sites, where do you start, or where's the starting point for selecting a site? Are you going to select site on the whole west coast because the typhoon came from the west, or are you going to be more focused on where the strong wind came in?
So actually I didn't go, but I think we just went from the north and just went along the coast at some random sites.
Right, random sites.
Just jumped in and had a look.
Oh, and then you mentioned one of the site was a permanent monitoring site.
Sorry, so that was just the visual, and then we selected sites to go and actually survey, and those were the long-term monitor. Those are our permanent sites.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just get this straight. So first, you just go and visually check out the reef, and then after that, you will select the permanent site and then do the survey on those sites.
Yes.
And the idea for that is so that you can compare the damage on the permanent site to the previous data that we have.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just kind of explain that a little bit to the old folks listeners. They might not really understand what's going on. Alol ko ringal Christina kasi selbol mereka ayolt ya trigal researchers la Aquarium Center mas raer temor sel for example al sumayol tamlara adaspadal etumra adaspadal idiomes dirga boloro idiomes aseng arge gora malmle telmelela ya mal sumayol taguk mlara agayuk temrul osisiu temora agel almol ra bangar along emral mil me tobdira gal almol ra dro albabor orior endi elat yagi del gay sa surigay en mlara agayuk kelme ayolto melang melgo la say temlor segid almol ra along e gora omes agel rifle mel el gora mo diul mes dirabol el bak mura orior mesela bol merego mes eto se okay Tial gora rif center angarnya agel permanent site el bekrar le monitor e seguida wallo el gael de obang wadul tuiringi e o mesatel melela ya wai del Typhoon melangare gagi del site el bel selector wa Christina em lo mesa gagi e sera bolo mes e seguida se ya wabol lo mesingin musubringi len soril un temil tagi del site asai kada makatatal musuba gagi del site mangaria wingil cloud ngi del sel telera ruera al matamal mela servor merka Typhoon التلمو مسا يجي السايت غوري كامباني لا شيء سال دراغ المت تايفون ملي غرات التليل الالبل ملي تايفون ان غرات التليل من غرا سبد مساسل تلم الليل سيل غرا وال بول تشينز سيل مش ادم مساسل نرال سيل سغوما ام تشي الدا ام تشي لوتا ام سو يسبرا المول okay I was just summarizing what you just said and so I understand that through your survey, you said there was no sort of like a significant a change in coral cover during the Surigay typhoon.
Yeah, so what we found was overall, across all the sites, there wasn't much damage to the reef. There wasn't a big change in coral cover from 2020 to 21 after the typhoon. Apart from Sias at 10 meters, so I forgot to mention that we survey at 2 depths, so 3 meters and 10 meters. And so at Sias 10 meters, there was a big decrease in coral cover from 2020 to 2021. There was also a big increase in turf cover. So that's turf algae, which is like the green kind of short algae. And that's because after a disturbance, there's space for that algae to colonize the area. Yeah, there was also a increase in turf algae actually across all the sites. But I mean, since we only surveyed 8 sites, you know, there's a big area of coastline, so we could have missed areas that were damaged because it was a big typhoon. So, yeah, I think in the future we could monitor more sites to see if other sites had more damage also.
Okay. So, you say the overall, according to the result of the study, the overall data show that the Typhoon Sigay didn't cause much damage to the western Aru reefs of Palau. And you're saying that's because damage could have been outside where you conduct the monitoring.
Yeah, could have been.
Okay. Let me just explain it a little bit in Palawan. Ang Christina malgolo say tial mo mereka lom subu tial yol tul surigay sabol mereka surigay mul tob am subul mo en gora wala mlakle sa agora mal klol tel melela wif rajagi del site del survey raal sel len adi mlosibil el miles el tara bal bol ula sel bol mereka sel tendubo ay gel el dulu aseng turf algae a turf algae blol sel ngari asa sel tum tamal la bertakle ese amagot el dubo a algae gal do aseng yum kora queen el yum seguida blol madubo ra abasol ligel miltamal ra ayolto en disel lo mesa sel lo será bol surbar wa Christina melgol lo aseng دي ملاقا مالت المليلة أجاجد الباسيول المس السيل بوضع كامبيرني سيرا 2020 لو إرى المي سوريجي En kau lebih semua mention sel om sub seloruni, temurur om subra erul del ela erul dolo, temurura sel dosen 3 meter, maten meter, sel du 3 meter tasay ngara 10 feet, tu bakal mo omesra sel bertak ngara 10 feet. O sisil time temurura direk tutul bakal mo direk murur om subra sel ngara ogdel feet 10 meter. You're saying there was a significant turf algae from 2021 to 2022 at both depths.
2020 to 21.
Sorry. 2020 to 2021.
Yeah.
At both depths.
Yeah.
And you say it's likely due to algae colonizing the substrate after the disturbance event. Okay, mungmalgol wasay sirabol mereka segid el yol tebolo subu en wablel qoradia kampal el marandel mladub len to moral wasay ngai gid el yumd turb algae amladub mwal gora tonget tagel bashira mgalgel amran del mosbel serel el sial gora malgorni.
So on that note, with the turf algae, that kind of highlights the importance of having a good, healthy population of herbivores. So things like parrotfish and surgeonfish for the recovery of the reef.
Oh,
so when there's turf algae growth, then they will eat the algae and then allow the reef to recover.
Oy mogi telom sub en gora la bol blagatak lo asay sel talbornya Typhoon el meso isbra alamol el mera kargen en wal matamal la abertakl mesel bol mera gayol tiago tuldub ay yigid el algi yigid el yumd mela lol gori la asay moral wal kwaklu tutel lo asay da mangasada la gora o mangalela rwa ayel ngigil mga yumd awarwa amas arwa balay ay gel ngigil mga yum arwa ang yao amal lamaw kabli arwa amal lamaw parrotfish leng aurere la gigil ngigil awalo ngum tsegi del yum mong mosab el amran del mre del gel ngisel amran da mosab el mre del el mo orbor el mutel lo moktuba bes el amran del mosegi del basio. Okay, what sort of species of corals did you see that were really damaged during that study?
So at SIAS, at 10 meters, we found that the more fragile branching corals like Seriatopora, Aquapora, and Porites branching were the ones that were destroyed, or there was a decrease in their cover. At that site. Yeah. So those kind of corals are more fragile to wave damage, so they'll get broken more easily.
I see.
And during the typhoon, the wave height increased to, I can't remember how high, but it's like storm waves.
I say, ela será bolo ruta y de lo msubo, el sel el lo hacen sias. التملم تيجي لسي ومسين del مران del ملتمال أيجي الغورا أبغي رال ما يجي الغورا أذبرت إملي ليوت أيجي ده أو مسين del ملرادرا أميل تمال لوجو تيال رنجلا أذاب المبور على مول ما كريسي إلى يلتلو بتيال ده ومسين del يجي الغورا أبغي رال مران ده ملتمال. And so you're saying right after that, Shash was also increasing turf cover.
Yeah.
What might, well, I know it's natural, typhoon is natural, but what are some of the factors that lead to this? What are some of the factors that lead to this typhoons and storms.
I mean-
I remember back in the days, when I was still kind of young, it's usually like every 10 years. The last strong typhoon that I remember was 1990. They call it Typhoon Mike. But that time there was no place like Coral Reef to kind of see the reef and inform people. But it seems like typhoon is getting more frequent these days.
I mean, it could be because of climate change. Overall, across the world, there's been an increase in the frequency and intensity of tropical storms. But, I mean, it's difficult to say. There's a good report by the Coral Reef Research Foundation on the history of typhoons in Palau on their website, yeah.
That's good to know since Coral Reef Foundation has been also doing a lot of work on the reef. Alolo ko rin nga kasing mlamo ko rabla katak lo sa igal tilmele la wastor normal muptok tial ngadal el klel de ablulat. Ngwase celular mo ko umgal da ablulat ya gid tokora wa typhoon mar wastorm amo mgudgud me dire el moral mom sisi. Mambulgulo asing ang gire del gora kada mal ke grel bulu I know kada ke grel bulu da amal kise de mogran ning gire del tral per gora usiga ke role le mosbe del sob klitial kledra blu ad min yaqloral mo altang la sedel come up with a solution that will help I gal gora a big international decision making body الغرة غرب تايد كلاد بلولاد الملقتق راسي تايد كلاد بلولاد اللي مرال مغال دا أول مملامو مغدغود ما الطيفون إمرال ممشيشي. I understand at Reef Center, at our center, there's also some study about reef resilient. What might or what would be what reef resilient can do for the health of the reef.
So, I mean, I mentioned the herbivores. So having a healthy fish population, I mean, not only herbivores, but a healthy fish population overall will increase the resilience of the reefs. I mean, also having, like, for example, a healthy reef also, like, for example, after Typhoon Bofa and Haiyan in 2012 and 2013, the eastern reefs were so damaged that they're still recovering. So they still have low coral cover, so they're not very resilient now.
Oh, mlakatak la sa selbol mereka arwayolt. Ya gigi del ngigil. Ay gigi asbe del gor omes ay gigi del dudaseng herbivorous fish, gigi el gor amagayum. Asbe del omes la sing ngwalor dia recovery reef. Elang gagi del mulko la sing sirabol mereka ayol trauktas padal. En wal gor ameu da recovery. Leng ngwal maksay gigi del armal. المهم تتكلم بالتقلر ذي تتكلم recovery. You know, there's been some work done on the reef recovery before this surrogate. Do you want to talk a little bit about the previous work?
The other surveys that Pickwick has done after typhoons?
Right.
Yeah, so there was, well, like I mentioned, the Typhoon Bofa in 2012 and then Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. And Pickwick surveyed after both of those, and it was found that there was like a significant decrease in coral cover, but that was on the eastern side. Then there was also, and like I mentioned, the eastern reefs are still recovering. Then there was Tropical Storm Lan in 2017, and that affected the west side also, like Surigay, but that was more it came from more the southwest direction. So sites like Peleliu and Angar were more affected compared to the north, whereas Surigay seemed to hit more the north. So it's interesting that only Sias showed a decrease in coral cover. Yeah.
You mentioned Typhoon Bofa in Haiyan. And you're saying the coral, the reef is recovering, but slow. The reefs that were damaged during the Typhoon Bofa, do we have any sites, permanent sites that are over there?
Yeah.
In those reefs that were damaged?
Yeah, our long-term coral reef monitoring, which we survey every 2 years, but now it's going to change to every 4 years. So we are able to see over time how the reef is recovering.
Right.
I mean, it could also be, there are other things that are coming into play, like, for example, larval supply of corals. So if that depends on the currents and if the reef is getting enough larval supply. And Maureen, who used to work at Pickwick, she was looking at coral recruitment on the eastern coast and recovery of corals.
Okay, alolo ko rin ngal Christina say dire kal oy gigi dingi gimi trabartak lamal maklo tutel ma dire kal wasing atara ora make media recovery say gidil toko era wasing larval supply ay gel ni sela amran de lo bongel ngal Berius at sugum dire kal kora for some reason kora ku kwal matamal umrolel mo moda kal bay gigi reef sa atara mo ulen dire kal meuda a recovery ra gigi matamal مطمئن التايفون المول عندي وين ايسا سي ايجي المول لو مصر ايست ما سا تايفون بوفا مهايان قدم لا مسا الواسين عمر او recover. When you say they're recovering, there's coral recruits and in those areas that were damaged during Haiyan and Bofa.
Coral recruits?
Yeah.
I mean, off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
But the last survey we did for the long-term coral reef monitoring was 2020, and that report still hasn't been written, so it should be coming out soon, and that data will tell more.
Oh, right. Yeah, but based on your observation, when you go and conduct this survey, the reef, of course, have a promising recovery that you can observe.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, for example, Lighthouse and Nadarak Reef.
Right.
So, like, Lighthouse has really recovered.
Yes.
And, yeah, there are recruits there.
Yes. Maybe I can also add to that. You know this Lighthouse? Back in 98. I'm not really sure about the latest typhoon or whatever. But in 98, when there was a mass bleaching, the south side of Lighthouse, it was all gone. 2 years later, it was all rubble. And now when you go over there, it's like before. I mean, except, of course, the size of corals are much smaller. Sila Lighthouse, mal interesting lang ilang niya sila matmala typhoon ay gigid blado ko el wasa wangi ke matial Berius sa ola bang sila mamaranda maral mo mambulgula say atara mo mek meudi tial recovery malibet tial refal mungtin mo du amang gala mandri ako tatsum mal makasingay gal ngigil mga ayum o ngero nga dire luasing al sugum tial el gergera for example ngar budur Berius amlam tamal embulgula say ndia kang isel se elo bengela Berius el metial talmal reef ay gaya ko ra mo mek meudi tial lolutela reef mo mo se el duba amrandrin yang ako ra dimlo mention sel lighthouse sel du lighthouse ential ngara madala ngamalal sel klul lighthouse ngamadala ngamalal sera 98 morin sel du dosen mas bleaching il mirablur belaw se mark klul basentra al Muller bela miltamal seguido lighthouse ampal dimlo dia ngaral marandri rogul maranda mal dimlat ya medel tarak ruru lagi orang ara ilmu betul segi lagi bong mlaaga ilmu marandal mleblitz wal mladam riri sel ironi mo belelew amla ramra adaw imla mo gora baras mla mo rabel memberi rubber tackle set ora 98 mensebedlo sengara alli rarurul 98 o ilira ruriul el al time sel de bon en mal diwa sera au era 98 mendira se del kor omes se wasi segi daigal refrigabri wal slow wal meu delen segi me del ngara lu irak segi da lighthouse na mo ngira ramo mengral gire del gergik el gora protect daigal reef le segi wal tegra me del lu irak al mobrigaber matsuma al molam tamal en sebelum saya ngara lu ragenya mungkin ko gil mo ndiakal sal mo ses mera ngaramo mlamo to ka marandri lu ngaramo ndi sel do bonge do mesen kadamo tigla sei wal lu ragar gil maranda mo mgegrel de alwa gil maranda ngaramo o bonge gil el dulaseng table goral a table goral la maranda el mel gora di imol la dal merbab e gor over el flat ma un table gora be bula table agel tibura gora rangara mora ngedra amina tele lighthouse akme del ngara elol melsak ngara 6 feet atengel ela sera na ita yigi rogo dimlas esel debor elang en mlal mutter moria manglegla il table goral digel wa mal mo klol doesa al adi ngara a 2 to 3 feet al sa klong ngara 3 feet gora wal tedo para yigi dil akora soal de wa yigi dem el gora meskida ngora meskida adai tail el temelo así al sumo mutamal la maranda sa 98 la ra tame de bon wal lu ma erura ruriul lu me de ruriul en se lo hacen sea aurigabri effort sea klunge la tame lo speria hasta el mal lu rifle mutamal el mut el bag el mursel gora asmera awali qot. Okay, that's very interesting, Christina. And so, to be able to save this reef from typhoon damage, I mean not save, but to hasten the recovery effort, we need to be conscious about taking too much herbivorous fish or making sure that the source of larvae doesn't get damaged or disturbed. For example, I was just explaining to the audience that the herbivorous fish are number one factor that slows down the recovery effort after typhoon. And then some factors such as you mentioned the larval production. So I was thinking, if the current is, for example, coming from the north, but the corals are damaged or destroyed in that area, then there won't be any larval production coming to the damaged site. That's what I was. So it's important to make sure I get reef adoba black ring motmok من داخل متمال مالشو ما يتجي التايفون السورية أقوك نتجي الساود إذا المول من الغريق واسي south west تيال ديم سو anyway southwest and close to تلال oy متمال سيد دي قال بيبي لو ريف ديم متمال عيولت أول ما close to تلال ديم المول من المنتين من داخل متمال لقى إذا قال الريف السبقل والله ذو رقلة ang isa lamran el metay del talmal el miltamal el mol mong sebel recover sea agora dai tay lolgoring gayil Christina. So it's really interesting, Christina, that we continue to do this after typhoon surveys so that we can have a better understanding. And hopefully we can continue to find ways that can help the reef recover. Mang close to tlel longot mok law reef. Agagid al malit agal gargit leng alsumong matamal ar typhoon ya gargar at talmal en mutel mal momeo da ate el اللوبا مغلقين عمران يعني شو مكذا قدم المول من الغرقيك را المول ما غرقين رقيد el du arwat Typhoon ra baby ra basyo ra karged rigid hindi gel baby la awngil kitmok le gora selbak le en sebed lo asen klote el ang isela gigid el selbak le kitmok el basyo ngari amrand el mo udurok lang isel el mo doal ma igel el mlam tamal ra igel gergel mlam tamal ra yolta e direk el klok tutrel el bodo ngel asen oy kada atro om ngigel makata maral mga wamas amar wablay ending gina del gora adire ke lungla bodo ngela se gora mo mindful kada gora mo ngela se my gaya asa adire ke baby na sabak le gel ngigel mga yum dama ngaranga sabak le tial gerger mong bre de gaberal boring ayolt mong sebede de bora kada gora mo selective malay gel gora the stang em giklo e guk tiak di dolal moral wa gigay da gel gigay da se edel gora am em guk maral mem klo lo ngsul dire gel mga gal اليوم ده يوم ال الموت اللي بيبابيليت را اي جاي بيبي را قرا وداس الجرا جاي التقرا يلت ان قرا مقل كاغلا سي تال غدا مقت قتال مسوبر تال غرغير امين مقت قتال قرا غاني ام سوبر غرغير مجي دا ادر بيلا ام قت قتال التير غرغير انديك دم لا ممتيغلا سي هذا سان بال دي تير تيال السلا غرغير ان اولن مريد الموديا غاني لي mung kadamral ko ramre ngasule la gel baby ra ko ra wala maral lam katmo klase me mala kadol durok kurtial ngi gel mora krel belaw dito garin al sel belaw le agara mo kada didul madenge rogoy agara mo en mlek lebe la om ngale langi gel mung le atter raklunga la bulwat may disa da adr belaw elang me kadamral mo moktoys e markang godang amral me makadmol mol mangaringi e direk lo asay kadom karar kan godang mungogegal betoklom subra akora center e kadokora mo mtiglo asay ay doy sangi la ora wal loral mo o makasay ora maral mo rio kampe tokora kampe regel market teira for example away ali rakram la memong en obora wa magit en sebedlo asay ngora wadil ngelit ngi la otrul gel dula se o yar adre bela amral mga ikang elo altan esel do magit yarwa ngaraklil ang kale na full bus o kada ka madre bela ngarak full bus Arial arwal la lu ngo kada ram la mo esel do magit tinda ka dues len nimlakal lodoym el altan esel do magit ngeng mesel kada Arial arwa ay gel ngigil dokora milnge mikra ngaramo nga otru lang ese hatar olang ola sei ngora wadi loral gul am kasangi gil ngora wangi di dolay gungigil me ultralen diga gel ngigil maldul mesa lebigo sentegi dil ido isra ada maral mubtok mung moral gora wilar ngutsil bodo algiri adro olbil gutmok lagi il bebir ralla el gora dire el protect tial garger gidil wasei mem dolas mil di mar tial ngigil al sel belaw ela gadol duruk ngil mar adab oy arada amral adro belaw ta direk el modwes la omal ngigil endi isay gid tu kira outside mung at some point tingir dro kora mom tigir sel bodo doring ya sem makada makarang ngara sab edel gut makli en mo sab edel wada sab akli agarger ma tialil do israngigil mung ndiakal ngem le kora malat kara ngel maral may e direk lo sisil time mal mo ngila rut sel do mesay gal kora program ra say kame do mer tialo ngedel makral almul abebira ko das el kora behind the scene ma sel bolak da sal maldi yutur tial sel almul sel do bor o ngedra kra almul en wa bol sueder koram sat el tial sel almul mon gora guk telgib el dosobo ay ya kora to kay gidel kora messieurs malu bang la do kora motmok el protect ay gidel el toera arwangi el marwa kargel mon way sey gid kada bol malas mi digay sewlo sikro la sey kada moyer kada makarange e mo sebedel wada gora sob clear al meled من داخل التمل من سيدل التيرينيل المرمضات التايم مبلغ تقرا سيوان هذا بلا لا سي غاريا تاكلو لا غورا ميل غورتيام اقرا دي مول مرا ولا لي قوم روسي لا سي تيال غرغير او من غرغير او لا ام غرغير من يسل بدوم داس مرال باي سيجيد kidit tiara irara ora malgara mol time sel doren sa mklad mo du mel muti al time ngral wadi dul tuira karger el girela a omngele ma omgerger gid kora mo make sense ma kei karger ul mo karger a ula omgerger anyway kadamre ngasulira wa a researcher sa adra ra ora rip center sa center el المول ممرو لا جاي الوريور من سبعة الجوكمة تيل ستيشن سادو غورا أودي درينيلو أيش المعذرة بلو لاسي and what's going on إسي أتارا غورا مال مقتر تيجي دلو لاسي بريوس الأيسي غورا سادو لاسي بك لرول ساندي سلمو غورول تشتي بك لرول ساندي سلمو غورول تشتي غوك تمام دو أيش را المرة أدرا بلو لاسي tial center gida gida logot mok gida gora result se agora ideal behind the tag del Bruxelles ice mo gora di gida mle somam el smother gel tial meta pigri del algo así ay gel telmelela ayolt el mera mera al mol rablur belao kama mal mol melo ngara center o siga sel guk ngari agora bes ya guk medum ego ko ay sirgit sel bolte mela Bruxelles ice mon mosbe ed roguil el gora aclavado lo tial center el nia center gida adr belaw ngarat motmok le ngara se agora mal idea lo así bedo ay sel ma adra blu rogul así ngara gel rol center amrul el gida la tora al mellel ma a garger ma adlu la arablu belaw conclude our thank you for your presentation or report and that conclude our show so we now we just open for
Kapong caller kangara air.
Well, good morning, Berius Live, Mr. Bukurrou, multutaw. I just got into this talk show, Berius Live, and I'm curious to know your guest. We've had, a lot of interns and those who were able to come to our center to study and do research work on the marine science that we have. Can you give us a background and your impression of Palau thus far? How long you've been here? Where you from in the States? And your field of studies? That kind of thing. We'd like to know more of you. And then I'll be listening and I'll ask questions later on. Clearing the air. So, Christina, that's your name? Please, indulge us in your background and your impression of Palau. Thanks.
Impression of Palau?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Christina. I guess my introduction to you wasn't really detailed. He's just curious where you're from and how long you've been in Palau, what sort of work you're doing.
Yeah. So originally, I grew up in Oman in the Middle East, and my dad is Greek and my mom is Brazilian, so kind of a weird mixture. For my background, I did environmental science for my undergraduate degree. And for a master's, I did marine biology, both in the UK, in England. I've been at Pickrick for 3 years, a little over 3 years. What else? I don't know.
Okay, let me just try to explain that to our all folks listeners. Ako meng mo subes agi gora malmo excited tial show magio bes gora malmo smodi mo gora introduction al guest ring gora mo kumakay ngal Christina segi del blalo logoy nga amlogora Oman atrablura
Middle East.
Middle East. Adamala adra Chris, dad is from Chris and mom is from Brazil. El time en kera Brazil ngal Christina mlora school lo pabilingera sera director of school el school ngilo pabilingera environmental science tia gora subela atogora environment science environment esera bol mreg nglo melar sel mastang ringi el guk ngila pabilingera kal mastang ra togora marine
Biology.
Marine biology subelak langar radao. Elam lamo ederakalo Rora Center nga researcher. Seguidi agora detail el background ng kal Christina. Sulang.
Any miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous, well, since we're on miscellaneous, let me just talk about the aquarium a little bit, since that's my... And so, makmutal koramal de ay say tiale aquarium rigid, ngania koram kegrel construction el bolorul, lesemo mongodo. Model wangaramong el sel de bora tiale aquarium rigid, egdotmu omesa angar el arm, mol mursel eslabla, e direl di mol mesa angar el arm. Aigel mgegrel tangam lam asimr, ngania koram construction lo longot mokl. Masel bodotur aquarium en mosbedo lo mesa kadalmut el gora dio sisiu information adolal togradado digo musin del mogora wal ngara TV etia mlom kotmok logi a kangeran adra board ma ara gora center wasei ay gal morgole rurak en diaka okyak me diaka sisbele laudod e makla itela dangil ruta gal bombo maro ara la kale langigel ngara sibel dogi wi e gora agut meklik tiamol aquarium mosbel molmol maigel moktegringi ya osisil time en makasadala a iteraudod ay gaya wagim koram lugturingi mang ngora diri kamara lauror ma guktara time mosegel gukmeo ay sa abesel koram ladu para sa aquarium ay gaya gukora di bebira di swakalo ay sa aquarium esel tarauror el girel tial el melela abolur belaw tial PNMS adire kalul taut mang akora malat kelwasay kadamo nguk ngariata me kadmay agora smada igel guklam katmoklo mang mosbira adra bulun momdila se sal masim tiang ya adra gora rifa ulurol gora omesa ngara mangara lul mesa alsel men mutir alta mangara igel gora lam katmoklo sibedel gora aguk akas pusub da dolole momdila sing what's going on Aya di teblo lo tapil so kal ngara misele ni sigi lo kadi so kalo ice el gukire la next el gora radio show